All right. It's so nice to be here. This is like the first time someone from Multitude has spoken in a while on this panel, so I'm just like very stoked. Jasper's here, Jenn is
Hello.
here. Taylor got turned around, probably going to the bathroom while he's been
Hi.
walking. we were
The long
describing,
walk.
yeah, we were describing this panel like as if it was a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm laughing at the dog in the house. That's Taylor's.
That is incredible.
He's so big. He's a
So
big old dog.
Fantastically big.
So big.
incredible. I am so
Hello,
happy.
everyone.
I am so happy for all of us to be here. This is wonderful. We've been having so much fun here at the Multitude Podcasting Con. And it's been wonderful seeing things happen where I'm not we don't have to do it, so I'm just so happy about everyone here. But we are having a conversation about tabletop RPG podcasts.
Woo!
Hell
Let's do it.
You may or
We
may not know
nuts.
what that is, and we are going to spend some time telling you what that is, but we're going to talk about why it's pretty much everything. It's like a distillation of what everyone in podcasting is dealing with. And hopefully the issues that we're dealing with are things you can learn about back in your home, no matter what genre you are playing, you are a part of. I am head of creative at Multitude, Eric Silver. I'm also the dungeon master of Join the Party, an actual play tabletop RPG podcast that you can get, wherever podcasts are sold. And hey, Jasper, who are you?
Hello, I am Jasper William Cartwright. I am the co-founder and producer of Three Black Halflings podcast, which is a talk show where we interview lots of guests, and also we do a TTRPG actual play series, or sort of multiple series as well. So yeah, very excited to be here though.
Absolutely. Jenn, who are you?
Oh my gosh. Hello, I am Jenn de la Vega. First and foremost, I'm a chef, actually. And but I also play Vivian Lakewood on a podcast called Fun City. We play Shadowrun, which is very exciting. I also just launched season 2 of Culinary Word of the Day, which is a very short podcast explaining all the things you need to know in the kitchen.
Hell yeah. And who is that all the way over there? Well, that's Taylor Moore. Who are you?
Why, I'm sailing on up from the horizon to tell you, hi, I'm Taylor Moore. I run Fortunate Horse, a podcast production company where I produce and act with Jenn on Fun City. We also make Rude Tales of Magic and those stars of space.
Wonderful. So I think the first thing that we need to do is lay out, for those of you who don't know what a tabletop RPG show is, you're playing a tabletop RPG game, which you might have heard of Dungeons and Dragons. That may be one of the games you've heard of. Maybe you've heard of Pathfinder. Maybe you've heard of Honey Heist. These are all games that you can play where you play as characters and you're kind of playing through a story. Maybe there's one person who kind of like sets the scene and plays all the little bad guys. That's the dungeon master. And the majority of the people are playing like the main characters, who are the player characters. And what we do is that we record ourselves playing that, and it's kind of like fiction. It's improvisational fiction. But we have this backbone, this spine, this skeleton of the game for us to lean on, so that we're not just like oral storytelling out of thin air. We just at the fiction panel, they write that stuff down. We don't, because we think dice is better. The other thing is that we don't just say things happen. We roll dice to figure out how the whims of fate help us tell this story. This has been a very, very large genre that's been bursting onto the tabletop RPG that's been bursting onto the podcast scene, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But first, I would love to ask a question for all of you. What is making an episode of your podcast like, to get people to understand how much work goes into making one of these shows? Any of you can go.
I'm ashamed
you all are
to
so
say.
worried.
Oh
yeah,
my.
me too. I was
Oh
literally
my.
thinking the
It's-
same thing. I was like, I can't
there
admit this.
are a lot of steps, gotta say. And I'm not even on the production side. I am a cast member. And there's just so much that goes into it. I'm gonna get really like granular about it, but we actually play a improv game before we even start recording, just so that we warm up our voices and gel together. Because a lot of us have had, a hard day at work, or we're doing other things and we want to get our heads in the game. So we play one word story, or I forget what else we've done before, Taylor, but
Lots of stuff, and then we play the game, we record it, and then it goes into post.
Post is the longest period of the process, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
For example, so look, this is part of the model of building fiction this way, is instead of spending a lot of time at your desk alone writing scripts and then you're in production for a while, instead you spend no time before you go into production. Almost there's a little bit of conversation, and then you spend the rest of your life editing the game you played at the table. The most recent episode of Rude Tales of Magic, I worked on that for, I want to say, between 80 and 100 hours of post-production for that episode to come out. But now that is a mental illness. That is like, that is my, maybe not, it could just be weak character. That is just me being bad at my job, perhaps. But that is like the one of the ways that it is different from many other kinds of media is the bulk of the work happens after you get it in the can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think
please go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, I think there's something about the with this particular medium, because it is improvised and it can be loose. Something that we usually try to encourage when we're playing through, which is not typical of like when you're playing the game. It's sort of some slight adjustments that you'd make for a podcast medium. Is that we might kind of like self-edit a little bit, and so you've got to you can kind of take things out. You can be aware of things. You can rewrite things slightly, and so I think there can be a lot of building of narrative in post-production as well. Like quite often in post-production, we'll cut like a whole 20-minute section out because we just feel like it flows better, and that's something that, like, I think, as you were saying, Taylor, kind of happens pre-production on like a narrative show, right? You kind of decide all of that stuff. You get a real good tight script and everything together, and then you hit, record. Whereas we're doing the exact opposite. We're kind of throwing everything at the wall. It's almost like that's the fun playground section where we get to like bandy about ideas, and then we get into post-production to really kind of fine-tune it and make it the story and the narrative that feels like appropriate for the characters and for the storyline, etc.
That's not to say that there's no pre-production at all, right? I mean, I work with the DMs, the game runners of all the Fortunate Horse shows, Rude Tales of Magic, Fun City, Oh These Are Stars of Space. I should get just a soundboard to play that. And we will spend hours talking about story ideas, the way characters are going, how to handle things, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to a normal work of fiction, what that pre-production process is like. No round of notes on any script ideas, anything like that.
And I think one thing, just to add in really quickly, what you're saying then about in terms of like that preparation, our most recent, actually both of our current season and the season we did before this, we did both of them are set in kind of like Africa-inspired fiction, and a lot of that process for us was doing like sensitivity work, so that kind of everyone in the group was aware of the kind of not constraints but the boundaries that you'd set again when writing a script or whatever, in terms of just being truthful to certain like gods or places or things in history or things like that, and like making sure that like all the players, the DM, everyone, like the whoever's editing, all has an idea of like what those things are, and that's probably one of the longest things for us in our pre-production, is like we made an entirely made up setting. The one we're currently doing is based on someone else's settings. We're kind of using that framework that they've given us, a sort of location, a world of which we run around and play in, whereas previously we made one entirely ourselves, and it was a North Africa inspired setting. Very specifically North Africa was what we wanted to go for, and so it meant really doing our research on North African countries, their deities, and all of that kind of thing, and then making sure that everyone knew the kind of boundaries and what all that stuff meant and why it was important, so that it felt like we were doing a job. When we were playing together, we were doing doing justice basically for the setting in the real world place.
Jasper, we're going to come back to that in a second, because you might notice that's not high fantasy. That is in Tolkien's elves and dwarves and stuff. So we're going to come back to that. Everyone remember that as we talk.
What do you
about
mean?
it.
There wasn't brown people in Tolkien? Whoa.
No,
But there were. They were the bad guys.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's it. That's it. Yeah.
There is something about learning the game, which I think is the thing, and you have a relationship with the game itself, deciding what
Yes.
game it is that you're going to do, and then of course as the DM or the game master or the dungeon master, figuring out what's going to happen. But like, it doesn't come to life until the players run in and do their thing.
Yeah. We took 9 months to practice Shadowrun, which is, not typical. We A, needed to learn how to play the game, and B, figure out how we wanted our characters to be. I actually changed my character drastically before we went to air with what we went with.
Yeah, and some other people on Fun City had never played
Yes.
an RPG, had never played a tabletop role-playing game before, ever. So, really, I thought you had before. You were the
Never.
only ones that hadn't. So we had to teach them how to be comfortable with that,
All right.
Yeah.
I think that we've established, hey, this stuff takes a lot of work, and it's definitely difficult. And yet this genre has been blowing up lately. Both in podcasting, you might have heard of the Adventure Zone, which is a show by the McElroy brothers, who are kind of the backbone of the Maximum Fun Network and their various stuff that they do all over the internet. You might have heard of Critical Role, which is a massive entity. They stream, it's on video, but now they're doing a show that's owned by Amazon, and they make tons of money, and they're very, very famous. There's also shows like called Dungeons and Daddies, which is basically, it's also like a genre that people who are successful in other places then start doing. I guess it's like they do their one thing and then they kind of do another thing, which is like their fun show, their fun fiction thing. But and people really love participating in it. And it'd be weird because you're kind of just watching other people play a game, which is a little odd. So like, why do all three of you think that these shows, tabletop RPG shows, are so popular? Why are people responding to this?
That's a good question. I think for me there is a level of immersion which comes from tabletop role-playing games, whether you're watching or participating in it, which I don't think you get from like a video game or something like that. Purely because I think that there is this kind of sense or a feeling of kind of endless possibilities and something truly unique happening that literally like will not and cannot happen anywhere else. Whereas with a video game, if you're watching a playthrough of Elden Ring or something, like, even though that person might be bringing unique energy and they're playing through it in a particularly fun way, and you still know that like you could go now and play Elden Ring and get the same bosses and have the same experiences they're having right now. Whereas I think with TTRPGs, you're very specifically kind of building this kind of sense of limitlessness. There is a real fun bit of like kind of possibilities, I guess, and the flexibility that the DM has. A lot of shows I know interact with the guests in some ways. Sorry, not guests, audience, sorry, in some ways. So, kind of taking on board fan theories and all this kind of stuff can happen like on a dime in TTRPG stuff, right? Like, you could easily throw something in or add something. If a new expansion comes out, if a new, you can build and build and build. And whereas with games, it's still like a traditional games, it's still very set. So I think that's what it is. That's what it definitely attracts me to it, and I think that's part of the reason why it attracts other people is that. And that it's also just very immediate. It relies on your imagination. You can just literally like plug in, go, and you're in another place. You're in another world. You don't have to buy a console. You don't have to load anything up. It's just like, you're straight into some incredible superhero filled city or something, just to randomly pluck something random that I've never heard of before ever in my life. Hell yeah.
I think there's three reasons. I think one, it creates narrative, right? It creates stories. This is hard, even like, but if you have a talented cast can go in there and make a really compelling story, and that works anywhere. People love to hear stories. We love it. It's the oldest thing. We go, I'm not going to read you the entire epilogue of Hero with a Thousand Faces, though I could. And, people just love it. Like, people love stories. And we know that audio stories were successful long before TV and movies ever existed. Also, because it's not just the story, right? Because you have the people talking also as themselves, it combines one of the things that does the best in podcasts and in audio, which is just people talking. It's like the discursive nature of sincere, genuine, improvised relationships between people that you can imagine yourself participating in. And of course, we know that works too. This is where every radio station makes most of their money, in the drive time hour, with hosts that are talking to each other. And the most successful podcasts in the world are mostly just, funny, charming people having conversations. And narrative play or actual play and narrative play shows combine those two things. And 3, you can get both those very cheaply. They're popular for the same reason podcasts are popular, which is that you don't need a lot of cash. You don't need a lot of cash to get into it initially. You very quickly find out, once you're into it, that there's some hidden expenses. You find yourself paying $1,000 for a sample library so you can orchestrate your own theme score, and you're like, what happened to me? You're just like,
Yeah, your time and your soul are also two things.
Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, you might lose your family, but hey, a microphone costs $20. There's that feeling too. And those are things that are very powerful. And you can tell different kind of stories with, there were amazing cinematic. There are podcasts that are telling stories that are way better than any fucking Marvel movie, and they were happening 8 years ago, and they were made by and for many times for people that weren't getting those stories anywhere else. It's the gayest, queerest, weirdest group of people making stuff that they never would have been allowed to make if they were trying to. How much can we curse on this panel?
Enough. Definitely enough.
Okay, great. Listen, for a long time in history, the only way to get anything made was to go to a rich guy's house, and he opens the door and the bathrobe's open, right? And it's like, you got to do whatever he wants because you can only go to people that have the capital laying around to make it. Podcasts and tabletop role play, in the same way that podcast democratizes, audio publishing, tabletop role playing games democratize two very wonderful things, which is being in a community of people, having a relationship with them, and telling stories. You can't lose.
Yeah.
We're also gonna put a pin in that later because there is more to talk about whether or not you do need that amount of money to start telling these stories now. But Jen, I'm sorry, I keep having puns, and I want to hear what you have to say.
No, it's all right. I think Fun City specifically is unique in that our show takes place in a dystopian future, and we sort of started the podcast a little bit before the pandemic started and continued to record throughout, recording miniseries and other things. But it's an opportunity to comment on socio-political issues of today. Yes. And it's even eerier that things start to come true from our show. It's just that we've had this certain prescience about what's going on around us and being able to express that through podcasting. Absolutely. It's incredible.
Jen, I want to start this next question with you because, I also wanted to invite all three of you because you all have quite a lot of experience in different media. I know, Jen, you have a lot of experience in food. Jasper, can I say what your full-time job is?
Yes, of course you can. Yeah.
Well, Jasper works at the BBC doing BBC podcasts, which is very different than tabletop RPG stuff. And Taylor, you have experience in various tech companies and then things happening at those tech companies when you're there. And I think that it's
that's a good way to put it.
I was a union organizer, and I used to work at Kickstarter. That is correct.
I didn't want to out you.
No, I was in the New York Times. It's fine.
No, yeah. So
it is on record. Yeah.
Yeah. I got fired so hard it made the papers. You're not protecting me from anyone.
So we all have a lot of experience in these other fields, and now we're watching this stuff blow up. How do we all feel? And Jen, I want to start with you because you've also seen food media blow up around you as well. How does it feel about making stuff in a new genre that's a little bit in vogue, or people are now starting to bank in on?
Oh my gosh, I'm not so sure. It's like you're already in the pool and someone does a cannonball.
Yeah,
that's how it feels. Yeah, so I have experience in college radio, shout out KDVS 90.3 FM. And I did do those morning drive time shows, but I flipped it on its head. I did children's stories and, and IDM, so that was relaxing for parents when they were driving to and from the schools. So I've been in situations where I've been on the fringe of media. I've never gone viral. I've never done any of that. And I also freelance for a lot of food magazines. So it's interesting to see the building crumble around you and have a reckoning. And I'm sure podcasting will also have another wave of it as well. But what I'm excited about is bringing more people who look and sound like me to the fore. And I know that it's a audio medium, but we really color it in the experience and the cultural saturation of telling those stories. It's like so important, and that tiny minute relatability is what draws people in so hard. And that's how I fell head first into tabletop.
Especially because we're pulling a story out of our brains, and our brains are different experiences. It can't just be the same experiences of an improv, a 6-foot-tall white guy who lives in Los Feliz who is telling his story. Like, it just can't be that every single time.
Honestly, I could not get into podcasts. I really couldn't get into podcasts in the beginning because it was just a bunch of white people arguing over each other. And yeah, I really couldn't handle it. I'm very new to podcasts in general, and look at me, I've started my own little food podcast like a couple years later. Like, it's amazing. It's a wonderful space to be in.
Jasper, Taylor, for those of you've been in institutions that have dealt with things changing, and now you're watching another thing that's changing. What is it like watching this change? And again, as Jenn said, watching a large person with a lot of money, because they're holding all the money, making a cannonball into the pool.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things is watching very established TV people try and figure out how money works in podcasting and be like, what is happening? I'm so confused. Because, like, the analytics and everything, like, are not what you get in TV. They're like, wait, we can't get, like, the specific IP address of every single person that's listened and how many times they've clicked on it. And do you know what I mean? And I think that they're sudden, so I think that's been a quite interesting transition for them in terms of, like, them figuring out like what they're selling or what they're providing as a service, right? And I think that a lot of the time podcasting is the way I view it is like, it's like influence. It's like being there in and being able to kind of be a part of a narrative and really sculpt a narrative and everything like that. And I think that more traditional media people maybe aren't yet used to that concept. They're maybe coming at it from like a revenue and like ad sales and kind of perspective, which I think the whole industry itself is still trying to figure out and nail down. And I think, like much like Jenn said, I think almost certainly we'll have a complete overhaul in the next few years. We'll suddenly go, oh, we should have done it like this the whole time, whatever. And all those execs are gonna freak out again. But yeah, I think it's interesting watching a large beast try pivot like this, to be like, oh, we need to have all this content now, like this is where we need to be. And it's a little frustrating, honestly, just because I think it's probably the same with anyone, who's worked in like a big company before, because you want like, we know what the answer is, it's right here, we want to do it, let's do it. And things are slow moving, which can be frustrating, but I think that's the nature of the beast, and that's why I'm just glad I've got my own thing like over here that I can pivot and I can do and I can work and I can keep up to date with stuff. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I could not agree more with all that. Podcasting, the things it provides, like the new types of things that it allows to exist are very cool. I mean, obviously some of them are very bad, like both aesthetically and even morally, I mean, there's some a lot of people use podcasting to broadcast it, but it's the same as, FM radio or the telegram or whatever. The telegram. It's just, the costs are killing me. I got to send one of these to 10,000 people.
Our budget for horses has been cut.
Yeah. An episode of This American Life in 3 acts. Stop. The biggest threat, right? The biggest threat to what podcasting allows is the corporatization of everything. But I really think that as long as the technology of RSS exists and and remains accessible generally to anybody with an internet connection, it will resist complete corporatization. Now, if someone were to, I don't even know if this is technically possible, but if somehow somebody were to get rid of RSS, or if we could even really get, if the idea of general computing went away, right? Which is what the industry wants to do. The film industry has been trying for decades to end the idea. Well, yeah, decades now. I'm old. Has been trying for decades to get rid of general computing, because as long as you have a general computer, you can you can steal movies, and you can steal music, and you can listen to free RSS feed podcasts. But if that were to go away, that would be the end of the whole thing. Everything beautiful about podcasts would die. But as long as that fundamental technology exists and we have access to it, I think we will be able to maintain some form of independence. And independence is everything. The best shows I've ever heard are not made in the show pitching corridors over at Amazelit or, I don't know, whatever subcontractor Amazon is developing at this moment or whatever. They're not. And because the people who come up with really good ideas usually would rather die than be caught in a executive or a management position at one of these soul-sucking, investment-backed behemoths that should not exist. It's a nightmare. The best shows I've heard don't come from there. And because we don't have to deal with that, because we don't have to deal with the typical board, typical shareholders, and the typical, we want to go public or we want to get bought profit motive, we can do things like hire the people we fucking want to hire instead of the, focus grouped people that are inevitably going to end up as straight white people that fit the sort of beige model that happens if you just sort of conglomerate all the middle-class shitheads in our country. So, you get to make decisions that aren't like that. For instance, Fortune Horse, all of our shows are run as consensus-based cooperatives. And all the money's based on profit sharing. You try to get that. You try to get that Google Doc through the process. At any of these podcast production companies, go to hell. It's too risky. Why in the world are we going to give an actor a veto vote over the producer's salary? That's insane, the shitheads that work in the normal industry would say. But because we have our independence, we can do stuff like that. So that is really, to me, the best thing about podcasting, is it allows us to have sustainable creative careers and also make those kind of choices.
And we're super nimble. We can do things much quicker at this level.
Hell yeah.
There are so many things I want to add. First of all, you saw in Spotify's most recent presentation of state of the Spotify that they're trying to kill the RSS feed. Like, they literally had a slide that said RSS feed bad because it only goes one way. So it's literally happening, Taylor. Like, this isn't some Shadowrun dystopia bullshit. It literally is happening. Here's the thing, though.
That's the thing about our Shadowrun dystopia bullshit. Like, it happens.
It's too real.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here's the thing: is that now that tabletop RPGs are expanding, there are corporations involved, and the two corporations we're talking about are Wizard of the Coast, who publishes Dungeons and Dragons, and the Hollywood. And the Hollywood industrial machine, and people who live in Los Angeles and things only existing in Los Angeles. So let's touch first on Dungeons and Dragons, the institution. D&D has gotten so popular lately. You might have known from Community or from Stranger Things or from watching a celebrity play it, like Stephen Colbert playing with Matt Mercer, or just the fact that Critical Role has their show that's owned by Amazon and is on Twitch, is the highest paying thing on Twitch, and the McElroys made graphic novels out of their D&D campaigns. The money is there, but it's also to the benefit of the corporation that publishes the books that is Dungeons and Dragons. It's complicated because there is a fantasy, traditional high fantasy story that is baked inside of those books, that have white, blonde, pointy-elved ears, and dwarves that are pretty much just Jews, and all the orcs are black people, etc., etc. So like, how do we then relate to a game, and how do we relate to a company that owns a game? Because all of the games that we're playing and using as a spine are published by someone, and a lot of the times it's a big company. um
Yeah, I got a couple things on this one, which is just so. First of all, very interesting. Starting a podcast called Three Black Halflings with a explicit intention of talking about race within fantasy and TTRPGs, and
you're doing a hell of a job doing it.
We're trying. We're doing our best. But like, I think it was a really interesting conversation when we kind of in starting that, in kind of making it specifically like a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, because there was so much baggage attached to it as a property already, so many issues with it. And I think that there's 2 points that I would make with Dungeons and Dragons specifically, and the way that especially the legacy of that stuff is so messed up. Which is, the first one is, like, a lot of people have said to us, like, oh, but if you have this many issues or whatever with Dungeons and Dragons, like, why don't you just play something else? First of all, no one would be listening. I want to put it out there. I want to clarify that it is by far and away, by like 1,000 times, the most popular TTRPG in the world, and you simply do not have the audience if you are talking about or playing a system that people just don't understand. If people don't know it, then it's hard for them to engage. I know personally, because I know there's a bunch of podcasts which I made by great people. I love them to bits, but I'm way too busy in my daily life to figure out an entire new system and then go listen to the show or whatever. And so it's just, even just from an accessibility point of view, which kind of leads me on to my second point, which is that it was really important for us to have these conversations and to be able to reach people who typically don't play this game. And so therefore accessibility was like number 1 on the list. It was the idea that it has to be inclusive. And actually, if all of your white friends are playing it, the chances are you've probably heard of it. And so therefore it might be a little bit more accessible for you then to listen to our show, and and then explicitly putting the word black in it, I think helped when people were like, okay, that's me. Cool. Okay, I can listen. Let me listen to this. And I think that what's so fascinating then now is that we're going through this kind of such a period of change with Wizards of the Coast and with Dungeons and Dragons, where they're kind of desperately trying to, they're in this really icky thing where they're like, oh, we want to change all the legacy stuff, and then we don't want to offend all the white nerds that pay us all the money, and we don't want to, and it's really it's a really weird space that they're in. But what you have, and this is, I think, what is so unique about Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPGs, you have the most incredible community of designers, creators, artists, musicians, just making content like you would not believe, and so much better than Wizards is. You know what I mean? And even Wizards, there's a lot of people at Wizards who will agree, who will say the same thing. They're like, people out in the community are crushing it right now. And if I may toot my own horn, listen to our last actual play campaign set in Utarum, which is a world we made ourselves. It's fucking great. It's so good. And so unique and so different. And I think that one of the interesting things is, and this is my last point, I promise, is that the Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, who own Wizards of the Coast,
yes,
if they invented this, it's a very important point.
That owns the
which is even bigger and scarier. But if they invented Dungeons & Dragons now, that open license would not exist.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you there's no way in hell they would have ever made that open license where they just go, hey, you want to make stuff in our world? Here, go for it.
That's
but
a good point.
it is the lifeblood.
I want to clarify that.
Yeah, sure.
The whole reason why we can play actual play shows that people publish for money is that there's an open license that basically says, yeah, you guys can do it because it's good. It kind of existed all the way back from the 70s when it was invented, but it is to the benefit of these places that you're making actual play shows, because you're promoting their game system for free in so many ways. Even if the story's all your own and all the mechanics you homebrewed, and you're taking nothing from the book, it is still a Dungeons and Dragons podcast. It's still a Monster of the Week podcast. It is to their benefit, but with with Hasbro owning Wizards of the Coast, that probably wouldn't happen, and everyone would be sued if those of you know some things about video games, like if someone makes a mod that has Mario in it, Nintendo will come to your house in 10 minutes after you publish and will find
dressed as Luigi, and it's real bad. But yeah, that's the point I'm making, though, is I think it's so fascinating to me that these larger companies can't see the genius that is the open license, right? Like that I can guarantee you Hasbro I can guarantee you right now there are some lawyers sat there being like, how can we repeal this open license? We must do it. But meanwhile, you've probably got people at Wizards being like, are you crazy? You'll kill us. Like, you'll kill the whole thing. Like, the day they repeal that open license, you will see Paizo, who does Pathfinder, they will be sat there like evil wizards on a chair going, ha 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 ha, finally our time has come. Because it's so important to the whole community and the centralization, the decentralization, of it, that allows all of us creators to do our awesome things. So yeah, just a really long-winded way to say that I think it's fascinating that corporations and big companies can't kind of see the way that the decentralization of their product is so much more beneficial for it than not. But you know, you're making way more money right now because of this than if you didn't have it, which is baffling to me that they can't see it. So yeah.
Yeah, the OGL is a really cool thing. Its importance cannot be overstated in the world. I have a question, Jen. What is the name of the company that makes Shadowrun?
Oh my God, I forget.
Because I don't know either.
We looked it up recently because this actually is very relevant. First of all, my first point is no one is making you follow the rules exactly. So you don't have to have race-based hate in your game.
Yep.
So yeah, we based our characters off of character creation in the core rulebook, but as listeners will hear and find out on Fun City, is that we create new sets of rules, house rules, to aid the production of the game and to make rules happen faster and to tell the story that way that we want to tell the story. And we don't really, care about, how that whole thing goes. And I just want to give you a little bit of a contrast in independently made games. So there are tons and tons of one-shots and one-sheeters, even board games that you can turn into stories. Like one of my favorite board games was Dead of Winter, and we could make a story from the random encounters and drawing cards. It's super fun. You should try it. But Stillfleet is a game that we used for our mini-series on Fun City. We renamed it Float City for a 20-episode arc during the pandemic because we could not go to Taylor's house and record in our tiny kitchen studio. But we have a relationship with the creator, which is really cool. His name is Wythe Marshall. He's been writing Stillfleet for the last 10 years. And Mike Rignetta, who is our other GM, has been playtesting it for that time. And so we are the first podcast to play this game on a recorded series. And what's really cool is that some of that material is going to leak its way into the book that is going to be published next year. And that we're showing people how to play the game, and it's just really fun to be part of that first wave of people who are discovering this and building the world with the creator.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned Stillfleet, because that is the only relationship any show at Fortunate Horse has with the creators of the game. The people who make Shadowrun, the people who, Lasers and Feelings, which is the game we use to make Those Stars of Space. That's a free one sheet. Anybody can download the PDF for free. God bless John Harper for making. And in Rude Tales of Magic, we play a version of Dungeons and Dragons that is like, it's like if you ask someone who played Dungeons and Dragons 20 years ago to remember the rules and gave them 10 minutes, and maybe they were a little fucked up on something, these are the kind of rules they would half remember. Because, we really look at the games we play as Slack, Gmail, the copper wire in our camera cable that goes, the concept of USB, OSX. It is just another tool that we use to help us make the show. We are not, I've said this many times before in the shows and on, getting in fights in Reddit forums when we're criticized for not playing the game correctly. We are not playing a game. We are making shows. We are here to make shows. the games are just facilitators to help us do that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like calling, in some ways, calling us tabletop role-playing shows is like calling X-Files, well, that's a script show. You know, or it's like, oh, that's a final draft show. Oh, you going to watch a movie? Yeah, I'm going to watch a final draft movie. They use final draft to organize writer's notes. So I call it based on the tools they use that they don't think more than 5 minutes about. It's a little different. Fun City does think about things a bit more, but the other two, I mean, no, they're just social facilitators there to help us know how to proceed in moments where if we had nothing, we might be like, well, what do we want to do here? That's all it is. And as far as like the stuff, which is the Coast published, I totally agree with Jenn. You know, these books are just lists of suggestions for things you can say while you're playing pretend.
Yeah.
You do not, and I think should not, take them very seriously at all.
It's just wild that you have to pay like $40 for it, and it has like phrenology in it. That's the weird.
Well, now you're buying the old. You're buying the old stuff on eBay, and
I've never read the DMG, the Dungeon Master's Guide, like never, and I don't actually know many people that have. Most people are like, I don't know this rule, and we're 3 hours into a game, so therefore I really don't have the mental capacity to make it up. So I'm going to look in the DMG.
Exactly.
That's the exclusive use of the like core texts of Dungeons and Dragons. And
I think that like the people that have nothing to do with media and just want to play games at their table, and they're making these games, I think they would say that they feel the same way, that these games are simply there to facilitate whatever nameless thing happens at those tables, which is fucking wonderful magic. Like, tabletop role-playing games is a revolutionary new form of, it's not art, it's not games, it's something. It's just something. There's not really a word for it. It is a cultural practice that has only existed for 50 years. And it's very rare that one of those comes along. So if you combine an entirely new way of interacting, you know, with people and making art and experiences with a still woefully misunderstood new medium like podcasting, you're going to get like these weird moments of overlap and misunderstanding and not having words for new things.
I really like that. I'm now realizing that like art and games are on a spectrum, like on a number line from 0 to 10, and then you can put where your show is somewhere in between it. But I think it's really good. I really think Join the Party is firmly in the middle, and I know that Rude Tales is probably more towards the art or the story side. I don't think that's fair to call something art or not, or like pure story side, and something where you need to play Shadowrun is probably more towards the game side, because it involves spreadsheets that you
Shadowrun, it's complicated, folks.
Mine is a work of art, I will say. My spreadsheet is very full. Yeah.
I really want to touch on this because we only have 5 minutes left. I want to talk about the Hollywoodification of everything that's happening here, because it's like Taylor just said, anyone can play, right? But if you watch the most popular shows right now, or you listen to the most popular shows, you think that the only people who are allowed to be on a microphone or a camera and play a tabletop RPG is a former improver or a famous celebrity. So like, how do we think about what success is like for us when, like, if we're
I'm going to cut you off right there, Eric. I'm going to just tell you to shut the hell up right there and let me jump in defense of improvisers. The NFL hires mostly people who played ball in college. That is correct.
Yeah.
You know, you want, if you're going to make up a story on camera or on mic, you want people who've spent thousands of dollars and the golden years of their life making up shit in basements.
Yes.
That's really funny. I'm going to remember that. It's very true. I think it's more about, like, then those people move to LA and that's the only place that things exist, when it's literally the opposite of what we just said about podcasting, decentralizing and the money and the place that people need to make entertainment. So then what does it look like for us now if we're trying to make a successful actual play tabletop RPG show? What does success look like? Especially when we're also when those opportunities are given out by Wizards of the Coast and the people who run the game. Like, it's when we have to participate with the corporation.
So I think now is the time for me to swing in on my Disney broom because as Eric described to me, I've had like the most Disney-fied version of getting into podcasting ever because I was incredibly fortunate in that like I did a cool thing and then like Headgun Podcast Network came on. I was like, hey, here, we'll take it. And now it's great. It's all good, and it was just yeah. But I think that one of the things that that like lockdown and everything did is obviously meant that everyone is more willing to jump onto a Zoom now. I think that one of the reasons why LA became like the place was because, okay, you've got all these improv people together. All these improv people have their own audiences. And so it made a lot of sense if you're doing a show, if you're putting together something that you go, oh, you're around the corner, you can get together in person and do this thing. Now, interestingly, I think that's actually, we're kind of going back to that a bit now because I think a lot of people now are like really wanting to get back in person. We recently filmed something in person and I got to admit, like it does make it felt different for us role playing and everything when we're in the room with each other and being able to like have the experience it shared together. So it will be interesting to see what happens, whether that kind of like LA-fication still, kind of ramps back up again, like post lockdown and when the world has actually cured of the virus as opposed to whatever the hell we're doing at the moment.
Right.
You do you.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, cool. But yeah, I think that what I do think is interesting is I do think it's opened a lot of corridors. And like I literally today was like pitching stuff to wizards, like pitching a show to wizards. Like that's insane. Like I'm here in the UK in Manchester with that kind of accessibility. And like so. I do think that there has been a little bit of diversification, and my thing is going to be, right, I now want to start doing UK-based stuff. I want to start pulling people from here, giving everyone over here a little bit of a go, maybe going over to Europe and seeing what all the awesome creators are saying in different parts of Europe and stuff like that, because, absolutely want to be diversifying this as much as possible. Sorry.
Hell yeah.
We're wrapping up here, but I want Taylor and Jen, if you have final thoughts on what does success look like to you.
Are we having fun? Are we telling the story that we want to tell? That's number one, first and foremost. And if we're not having fun at the table, why are we even making this? But number two, I'm a freaking chef. Like, I have no background in comedy. This is literally the first time I've played a tabletop game. Anyone can do this. Like, use your experience in your day-to-day life, in your expertise to inform your characters and make the game, because someone out there also does the same thing as you and is going to catch those little nods. And it's so cool. It makes the experience so much more rich, than trying to adhere to exactly a book or exactly something that you've seen on other podcasts.
I love that. Yeah. I would say if you want an alternative to capitalism, if the products of capitalism are distasteful to you, the only way to have an alternative is if you fucking build it. And if you don't have the resources to take the time to build that alternative, unionize your workplace now.
Yeah. Hell yeah. All right, I'm so happy that I got 3 of my favorite people in a room and we got to talk about games. We could literally do this for another 2 hours, but unfortunately we got to stop. But please listen to all of our shows: Fun City, Rude Tales of Magic, Oh These Those. Did I miss one of them from you, Taylor?
No, just the 3 for now.
Yeah, and then 3 Black Halflings and join the party. Multitude. We're putting this on for exactly what Taylor said. You got to build the thing so it exists, and it's exactly the thing that we believe here at Multitude. So you're gonna hear from some people after this who do this for work and navigate the thing. Please stick around for what your host for hire wants you to know with Tracy Clayton and Nicole Perkins, 2 of the best podcast hosts that have ever existed ever. Stick around. We still got some good stuff here at MPC. And we'll talk to y'all later.
Peace.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.